This podcast contains spoilers, so listen at your own risk or call back after you've watched the movie.
You know who you call. Leave a message. Maybe they'll call you back. Then again, maybe they won't.
We're having ourselves quite a little game of phone tag here.
Ring. I usually get this guy's answering machine.
I'll call you right back.
If you're there, please pick up the phone. I really want to talk to you.
I check my fucking messages every day when I come home from work. My answering machine, zero. I got a blinking light.
All I have to do is pick up this phone right here, inform the cinema, and your plan's kaput.
No, I ain't got no phone. I had to pull, because people calling all the time, and who needs the aggravation, right? Interruptions.
Hey, man. Very, very hot Sunday afternoon here now. Might be a bit of a chaotic voice message I'm sending you here. Just wife's popped out to pick up my daughter from a little play date, and I'm casting an eye at my son, casting an eye at the Liverpool game that's kicking off now, and just wandering around. But I thought this would be probably the only opportunity I had today to send you a voice note, so I'll see how much I get into this and might follow up later on, late tonight, if I've got any stray thoughts that need tidying up. So I watched a film last night called River's Edge. We watched Miracle Mile a couple of weeks ago, which we both commented was a sort of underseen hidden gem from the 80s that neither of us had ever really heard of. This is one that, it's got a generic enough title that I may have heard of it. I'm not sure. Certainly not something I would remember the name of. But definitely not a film I knew what it was or anything. And just popped up in a Reddit comment a few days ago. So I thought I'd give it a check. It is a sort of Gen X teen movie, I suppose teen drama, in the vein of, let's say, Dazed and Confused. Obviously that's a period piece, but this is set contemporaneously and a bit earlier, I think, than a lot of like the iconic Gen X stuff was, which maybe about Gen X people in their 20s. This is a teen movie, although the actors, they're all a little old, a little older than the characters, I think. Hard to tell, really. Some of the actors in this film are actors that would go on to be kind of known, like actors we would know as adults. So seeing them now in this movie, it's a bit unclear what age they really are, because when you see those faces, you're like, oh yeah, that guy, I know him as an adult. But I think they are probably a touch older than the characters they're playing. And just having a beer here, so that's why I'm going silent for moments here and there. Starts off with very, very strange looking young kid. I think the character's name is Tim, on a bridge throwing his sister's doll off. Even if you don't get further than that, if you just like look at that moment, you already get the sense that this is maybe a bit of a darker, a bit of an edgier movie than your average teen movie. He's dressed in sort of punk style clothing, and he looks over across the river to the bank of the river, and he sees another character who we have no context on at that point, sat beside the body of a dead girl. That's how the film opens, and the whole film sort of centers around the aftermath of this murder that's being committed. And probably one of the few movies that kind of start with a dead body that are in no way a mystery. They don't even flirt with murder mystery momentarily in this film. It's just straight into the guy going, yeah, I killed her. She was yapping, more details are sort of teased out over time, but really he's just killed her. And I wasn't really, I was actually born the year this film came out, but I wasn't conscious, I wasn't alive in this era. And so it's interesting for me watching this now and kind of trying to project this back into my knowledge of this era. So this is, I guess, the tail end maybe of the Satanic Panic era. This is very much the era of, if you're a metalhead, as this killer is and as many of the characters are in this movie, they're listening to like Slayer and Metallica, bands like that, that there was a sort of a danger element, like a darkness, like where we are. There was a lot of stories, probably most of them urban myths, but some of them true, of young people, teenagers, crossing the line between sort of fantasizing about, super dark subject matter and actually, unfortunately, doing some terrible acts that you can never really walk back from. And over the years, like I've listened to a certain amount of podcasts and seen documentaries about these events, murders that happened in whether it's a teenage community or just like a very naive community, not very naive people, just sort of not really knowing, fully understanding the gravity of what they're doing or what's happened. And when you hear about how those events go down, it's often, someone did something and then they just went back to their job for a few days, and then a couple of days later they told someone. And you hear about these things, you're like, why are you telling someone? Like it's so chaotic and it's so messy. And then the people who find out about it, they don't go to the police. They just carry that knowledge and they're like, that's fucking dodgy, but like whatever, it often plays out very differently in real life than it does in the movies. And not to say that this is no masterpiece, this film River's Edge, but it's an interestingly realistic film, I think, in many ways, of, well, what would it really be like? And this obviously happens, unfortunately. What would it really be like if one student in the high school killed another student in the high school? And for like an initial 24 hours, that was just sort of like managed, and, the information was spreading throughout a group of friends. Now, before long, obviously the police are going to get involved, and then it becomes a whole more formalized affair. But in those initial few hours, whether it's half a day or half a week or whatever, there's going to be that messy period of essentially children, or at least characters that have one foot in childhood and one foot in adulthood, trying to reckon with this event. And we see in this film some of them who are like, we got to go to the police. We see other ones who are like, we got to cover it up. We see other ones who are like, I kind of want to get on with my own life. Like, this is fucking terrible, but like, what do you want me to do? And the film doesn't really have much else to it. It's more or less a teen drama. I reference Dazed and Confused, but it's like there's a million of those movies where it's just like a very short period of time in the life of some teenagers. This is the music they listen to. This is them smoking pot. This is them fighting with their siblings. This is the stepfather that, this is, the girl that fancies her teacher. And it's just normal teen stuff. And I think when these events happen, which they sadly do, of some, a murder occurring within a teen setting or student body, that weekend or that day or whatever would be a real mixture of normal teen stuff. We have this love story between Keanu Reeves and, I'm not sure of the name of the actress, she looked vaguely familiar. Stuff like that would be going down, so interesting little film in that regard. It's definitely set in a kind of like, I don't want to say like the gutter, but like it's an underprivileged kind of, well, I don't know about the area, but certainly the lives of some of these characters. We've got the major character in this film that isn't one of the students is Dennis Hopper, who really has a knack of finding interesting little films from, mean, I doubt this was a major film just because we got Keanu Reeves in it in one of the major roles. He was a nobody at that point. I mean, it wasn't even close to being his first production, but I don't think he would have done many starring roles. I think this might have been his second one. But yeah, I'm really not sure how Hopper managed to come across this little project, but he is also like his house looks so fucking trashy. So like it's rare that you see a film, especially like an American teen movie, that is so much set in a real kind of underbelly environment. Now, one thing that is quite common about this film is that it's set in like the town in the middle of nowhere. Oh, there we go. Goal. Fantastic. Well, that's my bet builder destroyed because I had a different first goal scorer, but happy with the goal. So yeah, I liked this film a fair bit. The whole way through, I was like, I don't know what to make of this movie. It's so not the like top tier pick in anything it's doing, but it is like a good peek into. It reminded me a bit of some of Todd Solondz's movies. It's not tonally like his films, but just like small scale character drama, but a pretty broken kind of world that they're existing in. It feels like it's quite a pessimistic film in a way. And it's mostly not very contrived. I think the only bit that felt a little bit movie-ish to me was when Hopper eventually kills the killer. That was that felt like maybe we're going a bit into wrapping things up with a script kind of territory. I was hoping that they wouldn't have Keanu be killed by his brother, because I think that would definitely be a bridge too far, and they didn't. They restrained themselves from that. So other than it getting pushed a little bit more into movie narrative with Hopper killing the killer, who I believe is played by an actor called Daniel Roebuck, whose name when you're watching a movie and you see the opening credits and so and so is in it, and you see the name is Daniel Roebuck. It's like, Daniel Roebuck's in this. Who the fuck is that? I know that name. I've been seeing that name forever, but I don't know who it is. He was a bit of one of those. I think he's in the Fugitive movies, U.S. Marshals, Fugitive, but he's definitely one of those faces that we've seen pop up time and time again. Keanu is he's an interesting presence here. I think he's a pretty bad actor. I think his like lack of acting skill has been shown so many times over the years. Like this is a classic case of like, Jesus, you're lucky that you're handsome, because this is not the type of performance that would normally be a springboard into a successful career. But then if you think about it, soon after this is Bill and Ted, where he's playing like a complete airhead, like dopey dude. Some of his movies like Speed, he's playing more of a competent type of character, but even things like Point Break, again, it's sort of like dopey jock stoner dumb guy, but like cool. So he's looked into quite a lot of big iconic movies that take advantage or like use his skills or his whatever he is, his presence well. But then he's also had these terrible performances like Bram Stoker's Dracula that haven't seemed to hurt him. And then every time his career is over, then he gets a Matrix or he gets a John Wick. So he's been like resuscitated back from the dead with these giant fucking hits, which has kind of kept him an A-list actor his whole way through his career. But he's an interesting. I think when all said and done on his career, it'll be quite an interesting one to study. But yeah, we got him in an early role, and then on the flip side of that, we've got Crispin, who I was trying to work out like would this have been like where would this fall compared to Back to the Future, because I believe that's 85 and this is 86. So it's possible that Back to the Future hadn't come out when this was shot or something. Is it or maybe this was made before Back to the Future and there's just like, you know, the order that they were released in was different or something. But yeah, it must have been an interesting, like going to see this movie as a teenager in the cinema back then. You must have been at like fever pitch of Crispin's like presence, because I'm sure Back to the Future and this were both like very potent films for teenagers to see back then. And I don't know, I've never thought that much about him, but the performance in Back to the Future is like, it's crazy, but it's really good. I mean, it's way over the top. It's so cartoonish, but it's obviously brilliant because the film's brilliant and like everything is kind of working. And then you see him in this. It reminds me a little of Nicolas Cage, where it's absolutely fucking insane the way Crispin Glover is acting in River's Edge. It's so over the top. It's such a big, like, you know, there's these certain actors in Hollywood history, like Jim Carrey, for example, who are like, no one's ever done that performance before they came along. But it does, it is very engaging and it propels the movie forward. So I kind of like that when someone figures out like a new performance or a new acting style that hasn't been done. And yeah, Crispin certainly does that here. I enjoy it, but like if someone watched this film and they were like, I just couldn't even fucking watch the film because of Crispin Glover, I'd be like, yeah, I can completely get where you're coming from. It's a big choice and it struck me right. What else to say about it? I like these films that are, whether it's all set in one night or it just captures long periods that are on a particular night. I'm thinking Magnolia is another example of this, where you've got a whole ensemble of characters out in the world. They're going to kind of like bump into each other here and there. We're starting to establish spaces that exist in the town, and we get, we don't know what's going to happen when you get these two characters together and you get some downtime with them and you get a bit of chat between them. I think Daniel Roebuck and Dennis Hopper have like some really good chemistry together. And I like the vagueness of the Daniel Roebuck character, who's really like the most impressive piece of characterization in the movie for me. That he's the really interesting character, because he said he's killed this girl because she like, you know, she was like talking about her mother or something, but like he didn't even barely care about communicating any information. He doesn't care that he killed her. He doesn't care if he's caught. He's just like, yeah, like where's the beer coming from? That's the most passionate we ever see him, really, is like, I need to make sure I get my hands on some more beer. And he sort of feels like life and the universe and everything is so fucked that it doesn't matter whether he gets the death penalty or he gets away or whatever. Like he's like we've obviously seen that type of position or outlook documented so many times when you see documentaries about actual killers or interviews with actual killers. But I don't know if I've seen it so frankly shown in a film. I've probably seen it in a thriller where like it's supposed to be haunting and it's like an FBI agent interviewing someone in prison and like, I just wanted to see what she'd look like if I strangled her or something. And it's supposed to be scary, but when it's not played up for high camp and it's just, I don't know, it's just like, this is a thing that's happening. Like there was a lot of stories back then, as I said, of kids going into the woods with their friends, someone gets killed, and this film is a very unsensationalized look at that. Yeah, it's a film that like I was expecting to go way more dramatic or way more movie-ish, but if there wasn't a dead body in this film, if it was just about them hanging out and like, you know, you got the stepfather and you got like all of these kind of social elements to their life, then okay. Yeah, so then that could totally be this film, and that would be much less memorable, I suppose. But the fact that the thing they choose to sort of center it all around is this murder and this dead body is kind of gives this film its own little unique flavor in the teen movie landscape. Also reminded me a little bit watching it of Twin Peaks. Again, I haven't checked the timeline of which came out first, but both this and Twin Peaks both start with like a blonde high school girl, but as a dead body. In the case of Twin Peaks, it's a mystery. In the case of this, it's like they don't even flirt with mystery for like 2 seconds, like I said. But they're both the opening episode of Twin Peaks, and this is like, you know, we'll go to the school, we'll see all the characters, we'll see all the teenagers that were involved. And we'll sort of tease out the underbelly. Now, Twin Peaks is like a more soap opera. It's a very different thing they're going for. Okay, I just conceded the penalty here. But if this film came out before Twin Peaks, I wonder, was it an influence? Like, I'm not in any way saying that it was, but there's an interesting thing of like, Dennis Hopper's in this movie. He's in Blue Velvet. I'm not sure which comes out first. I would imagine David Lynch saw this film if he was, you know, if it came out around the same time as Dennis Hopper was working with him in Blue Velvet. And yeah, it could be just completely coincidental, but there's something there that just reminded me of it in a way. But, you know, where one is like a very stylized, over the top kind of very fake seeming thing, this is a much more verite, low key, kind of like almost like Last Picture Show. Just like, this is a town, and this is just like life in this small town, and it's a bit broken and dull, but there's also potential and opportunity here we see in this fledgling relationship between Keanu Reeves and this other girl. Again, I forget the name of the actress. I liked the scene with the teacher kind of grilling them on why is it that we as a society don't really care when someone gets murdered or anything. Like, no matter what happens, we go, fuck, that's so sad, and we just get right back up and do it. We get right back up on the horse and just keep on chugging. And, you know, you can imagine if someone gets murdered in a high school, like one of the students, high school's not going to be shut for 7 years or something. It might be shut for a day. And the next day, it might be a bit rough at school. But the day after that, it's just going to be like taking the test and things. We're so, maybe this is just like an evolutionary thing, but we are so able to roll with the punches to like an insane extent. And, you know, I don't think I've seen that conversation in a movie before. I don't think I've seen that studied in a film or depicted in a film. And again, I don't think this is a great movie or anything. I don't think it's like a masterpiece. I actually enjoyed it. I thought it was worth watching for sure, because it's kind of a unique teen movie, but it's interesting. It's a noteworthy film. And I think, you know, I'm watching it now, pushing 40. I wasn't barely alive when the film came out, and yeah, just it's not my generation. It's a completely, I'm very removed from everything about this film, but I can imagine watching this film as a 15, 16, 17-year-old in 1986. This would have been the fucking movie. So yeah, interesting that it never crossed my path before now. And if you catch up with it, it'd be interesting to see how it struck you. I think it's definitely a film that you could watch and just be like, what the fuck is even the point in watching this? There's nothing here, because the acting, like, I thought the score was decent. I thought the general aesthetic of it was like decent. It's all serviceable as opposed to brilliant, but it's also, there's nothing in this film that's terrible or even bad per se. So if you don't click into the wavelength of it, I think there's maybe not enough here to warrant going back and digging out archaeological style, because it's a forgotten movie for the most part. But it worked for me, so I thought I might send it your way.
Hey man, just doing a few laps around the park now. Don't know how far I'll get. I was taking up jogging last week, but it's 30 degrees today. Even now I think it's 30 degrees. About 6:30 in the evening, and you're not meant to jog over or do anything strenuous over 25 degrees. At least something that you're not very good at. And I struggle enough at jogging to not take the chance today, so I'm gonna do a lap or two. So yeah, your take on River's Edge is definitely the favorable take, and it's definitely the take I imagine that its defenders or its fans would take as well, would get behind. And this movie certainly has very high ratings and a very high fan base. I actually had heard of it before, didn't really know much about it other than Keanu is in it. I thought it was okay. You mentioned things that I very much disagree with. You mentioned Dazed and Confused about 3 times. I think this is nothing like Dazed and Confused, other than the fact that it features teenagers. It doesn't have any of the nuance, the introspection, or the dialogue or acting ability. And then you also mentioned cinema variety for this. I don't think so personally. I think if anything, and if I am being favourable, I think it's art house soap. That is a term, I don't know. Like I said, I thought it was okay. I think the thing that saved it for me was that it did make me think of a lot of things while watching it, and it did bring up a lot of issues, and I can respect that. And I do agree with some of the things you say, and then it is very unique in the teen sphere of movies to revolving around this subject matter. Now, I think that a massive amount of this is lost on me because I wasn't a boomer at the time, I suppose. Nor am I a boomer now. But or was it boomers at the time? I don't know. But I feel like one thing this movie taps into, which I didn't get or experience while watching it myself, but it did bring up some thoughts, is that this is almost a fear of the attitude of teenagers coming up. This is almost a horror if you're a certain age. And it's not so much a horror in the sense that there's a dead body. The horror elements come from this, from the apathy of the teenagers and how they react to the dead body in the opening of this movie, and the lack of interest, the lack of leadership, the lack of responsibility, the lack of taking grasp of a situation. I think all those things would be terrifying to parents who would be watching this movie of the time. And now for me, watching it now, all that is kind of missing, and it's just very camp acting. I think Keanu Reeves, and I am a fan of his, despite his acting limitation, is really bad in this. I mean, well, it's not he's really bad in this because he's not much different than what he is at times, but there's a scene where he's having sex and you'd wonder if he ever had sex in his life. Such bad acting. You mentioned Twin Peaks. I think a lot of the tonal imbalance and tonal mishmash of this film could be fixed by adding the Twin Peaks soundtrack. I think this feels very much like a soap opera at times. Now, I do agree with you that the elements of how they react to the body and what they do in that situation are real. It's almost like life isn't like a movie, so there's no narrative to it. Events continue on. You would go to the groceries, you would hang out with the girl and go have a drink. It's not necessarily a police narrative with a drone shot that would be on the scene. You wouldn't actually get to see that part as a teenager. You would certainly get to see it filtering through the town and might come into contact with various people who know more, including the person who murdered the girl. That type of small townness I can agree with in how it's depicted, but in the broad strokes of the acting and the dialogue, I think it's certainly coated in a daytime TV aesthetic and narrative almost. You mentioned nothing much contrived happens in this. Not to say I necessarily agree or disagree with you, but this is a scene where there's a guy who has a blow-up doll who gets robbed with nunchucks by kids who stole a car the night before. I'm thinking, yeah, that's not quite that doesn't quite make up for the lack of contrivance when you see stuff like that. And yeah, just think this movie's all over the place, but there is plenty of meat to chew on despite that, I think. And I'll give you a perfect example of why this movie is almost an enigma. Crispin Glover, yeah, I think he was 5 years older than Michael J. Fox when he was playing his dad in Back to the Future. In this, I thought he was terrible. I thought he was absolutely ridiculous. But about 45 minutes or 50 minutes into the movie, he's on the phone trying to ring Dennis Hopper. Dennis Hopper, incidentally, who also feels like a subplot from Days of Our Lives about this guy who lives in this vacuum from the rest of the characters in this house that some of the characters visit from time to time when they want to do something a little bit quirky, aka the log cabin. When Crispin Glover is on the phone to him and he says, I think he does this even more heightened for what he's doing in the movie line reading, where he's saying, I don't know what he says, but he adds these syllables to the word. I don't know what gay, and I thought, okay, he has passed over now into the world of so bad it's good, and you gotta respect something at that point. And you mentioned Nicolas Cage. That's again a favorable way to go with Crispin Glover in this, but I actually agree with you. If you can click into that, which I did at a certain point, then it is a lot of fun, like so much more fun than Keanu trying to figure out an emotion. And the other thing is, what you could say, I suppose, is Crispin Glover is performative in a way some teens are when they're performing for their friends, when they've taken on an identity. So you could say that Crispin Glover is acting like this because that's how a teen who has taken on an identity would act in that situation. And I think that's what I came down on ultimately. So I went through both journeys on this, where he's just so all over the place, and it doesn't help that a lot of the other performances are quite bad in this as well. So he almost tar him with the same brush. I think Keanu is all over the place. I think the parents of Keanu Reeves in this are all over the place. And you mentioned that the guy who murders the girl is interesting in the fact that he doesn't really reveal much why he does it, and he's quite passive. And I think his performance is decent enough out of the bunch. And I think he's the guy in Lost, the TV show. That's why you might remember him. The guy who carries around a dynamite for a few episodes in one of the season finales before he blows up. I think he's decent in it, but you mentioned that he is quite sheltered in what he gives away regarding why he did what he did. I don't know, we get a big monologue where he's explaining to Dennis Hopper about how it's about control and he never felt so much power. And I'm thinking, okay, fine, they would have been better just not revealing why. And I think it's a much stronger movie when he's just hanging around. But I think the most meat of this movie is in the opening, I don't know, opening 40 minutes of this movie, where the guy is with the body, and then it's almost like a slacker Stand By Me, where everyone goes to look at the body, and then their reaction is it's not what you'd expect, but it is something you could buy. And I went over this in my head, and I was thinking, okay, I do buy this. Do I buy that they all don't do anything? And I guess that's where you got to give the license to what the movie probably was trying to say at the time. I feel like I've experienced a little bit of this in modern times, where you have something like Eden Lake, which is a look at a certain type of society and how kids act and the terror of that. And then you have something like Alpha Dog, where I think Anton Yelchin, is it, who's kidnapped in that, but he goes along with them and goes around to these parties, and people witness him at parties, even though he technically could have escaped at any time. He doesn't, and I think that's based on a true story as well. So there have been these movies that have had their finger on the pulse of something that is very unique, and I can appreciate looking back, because now everybody has apathy, and for everyone, I could probably walk by a body. In fact, I have walked by a body in London, and it was just somebody who either got stabbed or who was, I can't remember what happened, but there was a red tape or yellow tape, and I saw the body, didn't think nothing of it. It's just another day in London, really. And I went in and got my whatever I needed from the shop. And I feel like that type of apathy in a city and in 2025 is very, very common. But the way the film in 1986 depicts what eventually would become very much the norm to news stories or just anything really, people are almost desensitized. The way it depicts desensitized teenagers in this is very interesting, and even though so many elements of this movie is very dated to me, I think that is worth exploring and the film does that well. I think that is when the movie's at its best, and that's also when the acting's at its best, because for all their faults, conveying lack of emotion and lack of character depth and nuance, it works really well when they see the body, because they aren't hitting actor cues that you'd expect, that they're not hitting the type of learned actory stage expression that you'd expect. They're confused in a lot of other scenes in what to do, I think, but in this it really comes together, and just watching them almost surreally look at the body and just exhibit very little emotion and very little reaction, and what they want to do is distance themselves from it all. That's good. There's definitely something there. And yeah, that's probably the main thing that struck a chord with me with this movie. And the movie's directed by Tim Hunter as well. You mentioned Twin Peaks. Tim Hunter's an interesting guy. He directed episodes of Twin Peaks, actually, so there might be more to your idea this may have influenced Twin Peaks, or at least a precursor to it in some ways. I think he also directed a few episodes of Mad Men, Breaking Bad, Deadwood. He's a name that I'm quite familiar with, and he's always been a very steady hand on those shows. I can't remember what else he did. He's still going, and he showed up in so many shows that I really liked, and done very good episodes of TV shows that I really liked, that I've took note. So when this said directed by Tim Hunter, I thought, is that the same Tim Hunter that's in TV land for the last 25 years? And it is, and it's interesting. I think he's good enough of a director that he adds film-like qualities to a TV show, but he's not good enough of a director to not fall into TV-like trappings in a movie like River's Edge. It's quite domestic at times in how it stages things, and the camera movement is quite basic, but he's not a hack. He's not someone who's just directing episodes of Hollyoaks. He still has something to offer in terms of style and technique. Like, there is some good scenes that are beyond that and a step or two above that. Like the opening scene in the bridge is very good when we see the body and the guy across the way. That's very good. And in TV shows, because you're used to a lack of any style, he adds a lot to TV shows, and I think while keeping the aesthetic that is required for that TV show. So it's interesting that somebody can find their niche and find what they're very good at, and to see one of their very early attempts, as far as I know, into the medium was also worth exploring, I suppose. So yeah, not as much of a fan of this as you are. Like I said, I thought it was okay, but it was the type of okay that gives you a lot of questions and a lot to walk away with. So, and it's also the type of okay that you can culturally miss because you weren't around, but you can feel a mirror of it in other films, like the ones I mentioned, which I also liked talking about and discussing as well and thinking about. So yeah, that's what I think about that.
Hey bud, just finished work. It's sunny bloody right now. Just watching sort of bits of the park deck. Really, really gorgeous. Lots of people around, playing, relaxing. It's funny, like the amount of times I feel like this is like a trend where you'll send me a voice note and you'll go like, I certainly felt very different to you about it. Like I liked it much more than you, or liked it much less than you. and then the sort of terms with which you describe it are like, well, that's pretty much how I felt about it. So maybe I come across more like I'm defending something, or more passionately about something. You said you thought it was fine, I think was the term that you came back to over and over again, and I said I thought it was decent, or I think you said that you thought it was okay, and I said I thought it was decent. Obviously very vague, unquantifiable terms, but I think I probably am a little bit more enthusiastic about this movie than you, but it's one that I can barely remember now, having watched it maybe 4 days ago, and certainly not one that I'm going to be treasuring for years to come. I think there's probably part of the difference between my reception of the movie and yours is the kind of terms that we accepted it on, the terms that we interacted with it on. It was interesting to hear you talking about the director there. I was unaware of his TV career. I think you referenced a couple of times that it has sort of TV movie vibe. It's got TV acting, it's got a soap-like quality to it. And you referenced that as a criticism. Like, to me, that's what this movie is. It's almost like saying that like an action movie has cheesy dialogue or something. Is I think quite early in this movie, maybe it was the score, I'm not really sure, but quite early, I guess it was also because it was like an 80s teen movie as well. Quite early, I clicked into what this film was, and I didn't really want anything from it that it wasn't going to deliver. This film's, I mean, I'm not saying it's the best teen movie ever made. We got like the likes of Breakfast Club and stuff, but as a sort of forgotten, sort of mid-tier teen movie from an era where I wasn't a teenager, so it's just sort of like a relic of like, oh, this is like early Gen X cinema. I thought it was fine. I think like if you let's say take the 2000s for example, if people watch Mean Girls in 20 years, they're probably going to think it's really good. But if they watch She's the Man in 20 years, like, I don't know if they'll think it's a fucking 5-star movie. They'll probably think it's like, you know, an interesting kind of captures, this is what teens were interested in watching back then. And it's got this good thing about it, it's got that good thing about it, but it's not, you know, I don't think this is a masterpiece or anything, but I did enjoy it more than you, evidently. And you also said that you don't think it's anything like Dazed and Confused. I mean, I think I said in my voice note that it's not really anything like Dazed and Confused, but I think it's a good reference point because it's probably the most similar movie that I can think of. They're both movies about the same age group that take place across 24 hours or 48 hours or whatever, and just kind of an ensemble, let's just watch this town. I think Dazed and Confused is set in Austin. This seems to me to be set in a small town, kind of middle of nowhere, but let's just watch kind of these teenagers bumble about over the course of, you know, a short period of time, where Dazed and Confused uses the last day of the, is it like the last big party of the summer or the first big party of the summer? I can't quite remember, but it's like some sort of significant party that's sort of like, it's not a MacGuffin, but you know what I mean? It's like the one plot thing that's sort of tying it together. This uses this dead body, which is obviously a very, very different vibe type thing, but it is to me sort of like that type of film where our main agenda is just summing up a teenage ensemble at a particular time. Like I said, this is not a period piece, whereas Dazed and Confused is, but the main agenda is just sort of like, let's take in the vibe of this teen era, and because they chose to show that through the prism of like this horrific event has happened, that gives it a bit of a sort of thrillery edge, but that's always backgrounded. It's like I said, it never goes into murder mystery territory. It never goes into like cop chase territory, really. I mean, I guess it is technically a cop chase, but it's pretty stationary cop chase where the the person who's running away couldn't care less if he's caught. And of course, none of that speaks to like the acting similarity, like the similarity in acting or filmmaking or anything like that between this and Dazed and Confused. But I reference it as a sort of just descriptor of these types of films where they're basically just set up to capture a moment in teenage culture. You also said that there's some sort of disconnect for you in terms of engaging with this film because you weren't a boomer when this film came out. I mean, you were, what, 1 year old or something? It's interesting. That I think that's probably the biggest point of differentiation between this. You described it, correct me if I'm wrong in the way that I'm characterizing this, but it seems to me that you were describing it as like a sort of horror film for boomers. Like, look at what these fucking kids are doing. Look at, you know, all of the anxieties you have about them listening to that satanic metal music and, you know, going out drinking and drugs and all this kind of stuff. Well, it is a fucking dark scene, and you know, check this out. Like, this is some heavy stuff. It's interesting that you interpret it that way. Like, I very much didn't. I very much interpreted this as a film for teenagers that was, yes, it like in the way that Scream is a film for teenagers, and Scream latches into the like dangerous, exciting, dark, like potential of teenage life, which is very exciting for teenagers, not in real life, but as a piece of escapism. It's like why teenagers are into like Marilyn Manson or the music that's in this movie. This, to me, feels very much to be a film that goes, Gen Xers are here, this is what they're listening to, this is how they're talking to each other, this is what they care about, and it is dark and new and edgy. Like, I think edgy is probably a word I could say 100 times in any given voice note about this movie. That's what it's trying to latch onto. Now, absolutely it's soap-like, absolutely it's naive, and it's not trying to be a movie for like Roger Ebert or something. This is definitely, to me at least, a teen movie, but I like it as a sort of relic of that era. And I think, like you said, I think the part of element of the movie that you were most complimentary of, although I would be even more complimentary of, is this uniqueness it has of showing how I don't want to say uneventful, but how understated a murder would actually be compared to how we would have generally seen it in movies. Meaning, in reality, there wouldn't be some huge frenzied panic. There wouldn't be people too afraid to go to school or too traumatized or upset to go to school. It would be like a terrible thing, but the almost more shocking element of it is that life would just keep on trucking. And when someone was shown the dead body, they wouldn't start puking or like having a fit on the floor. They would be troubled and concerned by it, but they also might want to get laid that weekend as well, you know. And I think it's the sort of only movie I can think of that does this. I like the way you referenced Alpha Dog. Another one I'd reference would be Copland. Similar, both movies where there's something that when you normally see that thing happen in a movie, whether it's someone hiding out from the law or someone being kidnapped or whatever, normally when you see that in a movie, it's a huge high stakes thriller thing where they're really trying to keep it under wraps, and it's incredibly secretive and protected and stuff. But when you hear about these things in real life on podcasts and whatnot, actually the person who's hiding out for the law, half the town knew where they were, and they weren't just up in a attic like peering through blinds. They were down in the supermarket buying groceries and stuff like that. Like, that's the way this film breaks away from the sort of generic conventions of, you know, high school murder movie or whatever, is kind of interesting. I think it is the most interesting thing about the movie. I like teen movies, so do you. We both love teen movies, but I like the kind of understated, breezy vibes of this film. I agree that Keanu is terrible at acting in it. He obviously has a screen presence, which he's traded on for most of his career. It's been a combination of being cast very well, like often being cast as like a complete himbo, but also undeniably he has screen presence, and it's not anywhere close to being fully developed here, but you do get a certain element of this X factor when he's kind of earnestly interacting with the other characters in the movie. There is a likability to him that kind of makes up the difference a bit for his lack of acting ability. But the other actors, I didn't share your take that they were all over the place. I think, again, this is not like prestige cinema here. You're not going to get great acting, but you referenced, like, for example, Keanu Reeves' parents or his stepfather and his mother, and like, as being all over the place. I think those are just like standard actors, you know, that you'd get in TV or a TV movie or whatever. They're not great actors, but I don't think they were distractingly bad. Which brings me on to Crispin Glover. You described him as terrible. His acting was terrible in this movie. I think that is probably the biggest point of disagreement we would have. So I guess my question to you, if you're saying his acting is terrible, is specifically what do you think he's terrible at doing here? Like, what is it? Because if he's trying to do naturalistic acting, or he's trying to do the sort of soap opera acting that exists elsewhere in this movie. In other words, if he's trying to just blend in with the existing acting style of this film, or he's trying to do like really believable verite type acting, then yes, his acting is terrible because he's trying to do something and he's being terrible at doing that thing. That I never even got like a whiff of a notion that that's what he was trying to do. To me, Crispin, like Nicolas Cage, is someone who is bringing his own art style to the films that he does. He's going, I don't act like anything you've seen from other actors. I do this other crazy thing. If you want to put that in your movie, then put that in your movie. If you think that people will find it entertaining or to be like an ad, like a value add to the movie, then hire me and we'll do that in the movie. And then you hire Crispin Glover, or as most people have chosen to do, you don't hire Crispin Glover. But if you do hire him, you then get Crispin doing Crispin. And I, for one, find it very entertaining. It doesn't mean that I want that in There Will Be Blood, but I have absolutely no problem whatsoever with the fact that he is on a completely different planet to everyone else in this movie here. Like, maybe you could replace him with a different actor who's doing like very like understated naturalistic acting, and it might be better, but this isn't a masterpiece. So I'm not like, oh man, God, if only they had fucking recast that one part, like how good could this movie have been? I find him very entertaining, and I've seen this with many Nicolas Cage performances where it's two things. It's the movie without Nicolas Cage, with all of its other, like its plot and its other actors and everything like that. And then there's Nicolas Cage doing something from another planet in the middle of it. A lot of people don't watch Nicolas Cage movies because they're like, he's fucking terrible at acting and he's unwatchably bad. And I never want to see like things like Vampire's Kiss. They're just like, I just can think of nothing less compelling than watching that. And then there's other people like me who are like, sign me up, I want to see that. You said so bad it's good. Like I just don't feel that way at all. I think for me it's not so bad. Of course I appreciate that people feel that way about Nick Cage, and like I can see people feeling that way about this. I just don't think this is bad. I think it's someone doing something intentional that's granted got niche appeal and succeeding at doing that thing. Just trying to see, I took a few notes on your voice note here, and I've got to pick up my daughter from nursery, so just to wrap through some of the later notes here. Yeah, so the sex scene is hilarious. Like Keanu is he's so adorable in his fucking terrible acting. Like when you watch Bram Stoker's Dracula, or even like more recent stuff like Knock Knock, which is like a character drama, like it's just, he's so earnest and he's so sincere. He's so trying to do a good job. Like you see great actors phoning it in a lot of the time. That's a common thing you see. Like, this guy could be like in Hamlet. He's in some shitty direct-to-video movie and he's phoning it in. Like we've seen that plenty of times. And Keanu's kind of the opposite of that, where he's like just a really, really bad actor who's trying his absolute best, and he's like probably the guy who stays latest on set to make sure that like the second AD got everything he wanted. And yeah, but definitely I agree in that sex scene. I burst out laughing because it's just like, what the fuck, man? Like you've got no reference point for how to act in anything. And yeah, I don't know. I guess we're gonna come away with like different. I think we probably had similar-ish experiences with the film, because you did say that you thought it was okay, and there seemed to be a few things there for you to chew on, which I think is like not too removed from like how much I got out of this film, but we'll probably come away from it a bit differently on the sentiment level. It's like we're just like just an inch either side of that tipping point between like coming away generally feeling positive, like lightly positive about the movie, or you feeling like lightly negative about the film. But as I said, it's more or less forgotten to me now, this movie, and yeah, I'll just I guess, you know, maybe I'll have a look at that director. According to you, I've already seen a lot of his work across the likes of Mad Men and Twin Peaks and stuff like that. And it's interesting you saying that he did direct some episodes of Twin Peaks, because of course I don't know which episodes, but if they were like early episodes, like, you know, first season, even pilot episode, I'm not sure where he falls in the running of it, but this movie does have a hell of a lot of similarity with Twin Peaks. Now, could be completely accidental, because Twin Peaks is leaning on like really, really pre-existing tropes, like basically soap opera, teen fare, or not even teen, just like small town soap opera type thing. So it could be just completely coincidental. But now hearing that the director went on to direct episodes, I wonder, I have no idea, but I wonder if he actually is somewhat responsible for what we think of when we think of the DNA of Twin Peaks, because obviously it goes beyond David Lynch. I mean, I think, is it Mark Frost, the other guy? So I think it was Mark Frost's baby, and then David Lynch kind of like weirded it all off and added all the Lynchian energy, and that sort of makes it, the fact, the alchemy between those two things is like really entertaining and really engrossing. But there's probably a bunch of other unsung contributors who added their own little sort of approach that they just, and it is such a soap opera type show that it'd be interesting if this guy, and maybe even this movie, brought some of that DNA to the party. I guess that'll be the main impact of this film, if that is the case. Although, like I said, if you were a teenager when this came out, this could well be one of the movies that you absolutely treasure as like super iconic film of your youth.
Yeah, to get back to your Crispin Glover paradox. You asked me a question there a minute ago that I can't fully remember how you phrased it, but it was basically, what didn't I like about it? Well, a few things have come into light. So first of all, if I was being unkind to why a performance like that is so bad, I would say it distracts from every other actor in the movie, everything the director is trying to do, everything that the screenwriter is trying to do, by going into business for yourself in every scene and making it about you and detracting from everything else that would have happened had you not been there. That's what I would say. And that's what I would have said to you yesterday. Today, I am back to kind of do a complete U-turn and defend the performance a little. And I think towards the end of my voice note yesterday, I had said about 45 minutes, I started clicking into it and enjoying it. And I'll go even further. After sending you the voice note, I started looking up Crispin Glover movies and then looked up a list of his other performances. And I'm thinking to myself as I'm doing it, why am I looking up Crispin Glover? What the fuck's his name even? Crispin Glover. Is that his name? Why am I looking up his performances if I had such a bad time with his performance in this movie? Why would I even be interested in looking up some more? And it is exactly for the reason you said, because he does something that you just can't quantify. Is it good? Is it bad? Does it work? Does it not work? And then I went to bed that night and I started thinking about the movie a little bit more. And then I started thinking, in a movie where everybody is so clueless and indifferent with their emotion and slacker like in how they react to everything, isn't it a strength of the movie that we have an actor who I now think has performed as a teenager performing within that movie? You know, these type of things where somebody makes emo their identity, where someone makes rock and roll their identity, where somebody makes sport their identity, or even Oasis or Metallica as a teen. I feel like this guy has made being hyper emotional and being seen to do things a certain way, his identity in this movie. So the over the topness and the extreme level of emotion that he's showing actually works in this movie and complements quite a few things that the movie is trying to do regarding the apathy of the rest of the teenagers and how they struggle with reacting to the body in a way that you would expect. So I am now doing a complete U-turn, as I maybe did 45 minutes into the movie, and I'm even going to say I might even check out some other stuff of what this guy does. And funny, it's interesting you mentioned Nicolas Cage. He's in a movie with Nicolas Cage. I think he's in Wild at Heart. Now, I don't know if I can handle a Nicolas Cage and a Crispin Glover in the same movie. As much as a big fan I am of Nicolas Cage, that might just be absolute chaos. But I am kind of curious. And just to pick up on a few other points you've said there, I don't think this is a movie for boomers. I'm saying that there's an element of this movie that is missing from my reference point that I can identify that certain audience members would have got from this movie. And it's not so much in, oh, look at these teenagers, they're drunk and going out partying and all that. That's not the scary part. The scary part is specifically in how they handle seeing the body and how they deal with it. That would be the scary part. And that's the type of element of a parent watching this movie that I think is there that I can identify. And the other thing is as well is, yeah, fair enough. This is probably a cult movie and a cultural touchstone for teens of a certain age, and that's fine. But there's one thing discussing that within the context of when the movie was released. But I think in the context of when I came to this movie, it doesn't really mean anything to me, and it didn't really do anything to me or for me. So I would say that as well. And yeah, I think I said the movie was okay, and you said you liked the movie quite a bit. And yeah, not to say I don't think this movie is only okay, but I did think about this movie a little bit more after the fact as well. So I would say a little bit more north of okay, but still in the okay-ish. But there's a few other things I thought about, and that's in how, in relation to the lack of feeling that's displayed by many of these people in this movie, the initial killer, he kills, minus that monologue, almost with a lack of interest, a lack of intent, a lack of feeling. At least that's how it's portrayed. Dennis Hopper's character then kills him because he seems to show a lack of feeling, and because Dennis Hopper views that as much more dangerous than just killing somebody that you cared for. So Dennis Hopper's murder is out of emotion, extreme emotion, actually, and which contrasts the first killer's emotionless stance. And then the other act of violence, which we don't really get actually, but it's an attempt on violence, I suppose, is when Keanu Reeves' brother goes to kill him with the gun, and that's because he's hurt. So it's interesting in a different way that emotions are floating around the various acts of potential violence and violence itself in this movie, which I thought was a nice little addition as well. And yeah, so I guess that's my thoughts on that. Certainly not a complete waste of time or a bust or anything. I'm definitely glad I've seen it, but I'll always rank something entertainment, popcorn and mount enjoyment first, and then next what it was like to discuss it, and then it's almost like a combination of that, what it comes down to how I ultimately feel about a movie. But yeah. Oh yeah, that's what I was going to say as well. I think you felt like you knew exactly what this movie wanted to be and was, so you swam with the current, so to speak. I felt like this movie never truly knew what it was and had too many conflicting elements. So I suppose that probably dictated which way we ultimately went with it as well. But yeah.
Yes, but I think we're kind of like sliding towards an equilibrium of how we feel about this movie. I finished the movie, turned to my wife, who I watched it with, and I was like, I thought that was worth watching. I thought that was like decent enough. It's not going to set the world on fire, but like, I think it had enough uniqueness. I actually like the kind of hangout vibes of it. It is like, you could watch this movie, and I could watch this movie and sort of go, I can very clearly imagine a way better version of this movie. This feels like you polish this script, you get a better director in, you get better casting, and you could have a really good movie on your hands here. So it falls short of its potential, absolutely. But at the same time, I wasn't bored personally watching it. I liked the world. I liked the setting. I wouldn't mind watching a TV show in this setting of kind of like sort of middle of nowhere, suburban 80s, sort of disenfranchised youth kind of thing. Um, and yeah, it's I think it's got a bit of bite to it. Like it's quite dark for a teen movie. It is still a teen movie. It's got that precocious, like young people sort of trying to figure out themselves and the world and stuff. Um, it's got the weirdness, Crispin Glover, Dennis Hopper character. Um, yeah, there was enough there that I liked, but sometimes you watch a movie and it's a great movie, and sometimes you watch a movie and you're like, that was all right, you know, that'll while away an evening. So that's how I would describe this one. But yeah, it's funny listening to hear you like grapple with Crispin. Like you're both sort of fascinated by him, his like weird thing that he does, but then you're also reconciling it back to like being realistic somehow. You're like, well, you know what, if maybe he's performing that character to like people put on an act, they put on a show, some guy pretends that he's a cool skater dude and this guy pretends that, and he's doing his performance. It's like, to me, he's just doing what Crispin Glover does. Like not every actor and every performance can be reconciled back to being a logical and realistic component of this world. And you mentioned there, like, I know it sounds like you've really warmed to him. It's to the point where you're even considering checking out some movies just because he's in them, which I would certainly be enthusiastic to join you in. But you talked at the beginning there about like one criticism that one could have that you're sort of drifting away from is that performances like these, or choices like these, actors like these, approaches like these, they distract from what everyone else is doing. Like they distract from the movie. You're making a choice to go in a completely different direction, so you're sort of like corrupting everything around you. And what I would hope is that the producers and directors of movies that feature Crispin are hiring him because of what he does. They want this thing in the movie. It is surreal. It's not realistic, him in this film, but it's entertaining to me. It's engaging. He's in the movie from a very, very early point, and I'm like, yep, put that guy in the fucking movie. Put that performance in. This is exciting. This is brilliant. It's a perfect sort of like counterpoint to Keanu Reeves' style of acting. So yeah, I was a fan, and yeah, let me know if you get any further along the Crispin train.
Sorry, I'm just saving our voice notes now, and it just gives me an opportunity to say one other thing that I was debating whether it needed to be said, and it probably doesn't. Just with Crispin Glover, it's not so much I was trying to come up with a reason why he was doing what he was doing. Like you said, he's just doing some batshit thing because that's what Crispin Glover does. I'm just saying, once somebody does that and it bumps up against other teams in the movie, it can be presented in a way to the viewer. So I'm not saying for 1 minute Crispin Glover is playing a teen with that in mind, what I was saying regarding taking on an identity, but watching it as an audience member and taking the movie as a whole, I feel like there's something to that in the viewing experience. But yeah, just had to add that there. Couldn't let it lie, apparently. But yeah.
Your mailbox is full. Please delete new or stored messages which you no longer need so that new messages may be received.